Hello everyone, I'm Rishi Persad and welcome back to Racing Weekly, a podcast and YouTube show brought to you by oddschecker in association with Bet365, looking ahead to some good racing this weekend at Doncaster and Newbury and the Bet365 card at Kelso as well. Steve Ryder in his usual position to my left, and we welcome back a friend of the show, Dan Overall, as well, to help us look back and forward in the next hour or so. Dan, I wanted to ask you, normally we talk a lot about races recently run and the effect on Cheltenham, so less of that today.
Yep.
But what we can do is get straight into Cheltenham selection for you, so you can get the juices flowing for the festival.
Unheard of, no one doing Cheltenham selection to the minute.
It's
This
crazy,
is unprecedented content right here. But it is handicap weight reveal day, so it only feels right we go to a handicap. Actually, I think we already know this horse's weight. And you look at the plate at the minute, I think, with the novice handicap being on the same day, that race is going to cut up substantially. So normally you'd be looking for that progressive novice free runs, but obviously it's all now changed. And the plate has a habit of bringing up course form time and time again. I think the last 6 winners had a course win to their name going into it. Step forward Gemarand, who broke my heart when he beat Madara in the December version of the race. Obviously he held on quite gamely there. Madara looked like he was going to take him, didn't. He's had excuses on 2 runs since. Went to New Year's Day when Venetia's horses were just really out of form. Went off favourite for that. Probably a bit too quick turnaround as well. Then ran on Trials Day where change of tactics, held up, normally ridden forward. Plenty of excuses for that. Dropped a couple of pounds to a mark 142. Venetia has a fantastic record in the race. Turning back into form, returned to positive tactics, course form. I think he's 16-1 currently. The way that race will cut up, I think he'll go off a bit shorter.
Has anyone asked you for this before?
Yes, many times. But also,
feels like you.
I spend an inordinate amount of time looking at the handicaps as there are, and there's now 11 of them.
Yeah.
So it's really taking up a lot of my time. So a lot of work's been done. But I just think the way the plate will cut up, at the minute he does make quite a lot of appeal.
As I mentioned, Steve, last weekend, some good racing to reflect on, which we will do very shortly. But I suppose it was quite refreshing that the majority of the races didn't really seem to have too significant an impact on what's to come at Cheltenham. So you could just enjoy them in their own context.
Yeah, back in the day, that Kempton card did have pointers towards the Cheltenham Festival. It's now kind of a springboard to Aintree. Everything that we seem to be looking at now is, oh yeah, we'll head to Aintree rather than Cheltenham, which is perfectly fine. And yeah, I thought it was a good weekend of action. The weather was slightly different. I think we kind of previewed it in the thought that it was going to be good to soft ground, and it ended up being soft ground at Kempton, which changed some of the conditions of the races. But yeah, it's going to be a good weekend to look back on, I think.
Yes, and let's get into it because now it's time for Racing Recap. And we start at Kempton with the Pendle Novices Chase, which was won by Rubaud. It was the sort of performance from the horse that I didn't really expect because he didn't really jump very well.
No.
He was off the bridle, but it was the sort of ride that we have come to expect from Harry Cobden. I thought he was outstanding.
A winning nap for you as well, was it, from last week? You know, I'll
listen,
get it in there.
Can I just say,
Go on.
The fact that he ran was already a winner for me because I think Steve will confirm.
Was Larry's bar before that as well?
The week before, yes, not the week that he actually ran and pulled out.
Oh, don't even get me started on that. That was that's a whole other kettle
I think
of fish.
I've had 10 naps that haven't run.
That's impressive, really.
I feel like I've achieved something.
Honestly, I think if you try to do that, you wouldn't be able to be as successful. So you probably deserve this one.
Well, also in fairness, I mean, Steve, you also wanted to put him up as well, didn't you? I mean, Steve was also all over it.
Yeah, that was
wasn't rocket science to find him.
No.
But what a ride.
Well, also, I don't think you would have been happy at any stage of that race, would you?
No.
You must have been thinking, I wish he didn't have run. Obviously, far more rain came than we expected. Obviously, as you say, Steve, that definitely impacted the conditions. We're used to this horse being a speedy 2-miler. He had his track. You thought he might get his ground. 2.5 miles maybe posed a different question. But he didn't even travel into the race. Obviously, he tried to go forward. A mistake down the back, I think the 11th on the back foot. Obviously, Harry just having to galvanise him, found 3 good jumps up the straight and battled on to win. Pretty impressively in the end. Look, the bare form of that, getting £5 from Boombourne and Mark of Gold, that's not exactly Grade 1 novice chase winning form if they're going to go on to Aintree, but you'd be hoping for better ground there. And clearly he's showing a new dimension to him. Obviously, as I say, I'm used to associating being a proper speed horse, now digging deep over 2.5 miles. So that does open doors in the future.
That was the first time over that trip, and as Dan says, the suggestion is he could probably get a bit further with the way he raced, especially if he jumped better.
Yeah, stamina was no question mark. Around his jumping, it was the first time he was really put under pressure. He often gets gifted an easy lead over hurdles, whereas Imperial Saint they were at pains to make sure that he was alongside in order to put his jumping under there. Harry Cobham just reminds me so much of Ruby Walsh. Like, normally so stylish and quiet in the saddle, but he was at pains to make sure that he didn't give up that inside track at Kempton. I thought he was absolutely brilliant on him. I then looked at, obviously they're going to head to the Manifesto over 2.5 miles at Aintree. Flat track will suit him. Going left-handed. He jumped slightly left-handed actually at Kempton, so that probably isn't going to be a negative at Aintree. I then went through and tried to kind of predict the field. I imagine handstands will go over the 3 mile one, the Mildmay. Then you've then got the likes of like Django Bay, Gidley Park if he's back. Obviously he's going to miss Cheltenham for a setback. You've then got Springwell Bay. He's obviously got a few options at the Cheltenham Festival. I think he's a 2.5 miler. He's definitely better than Caldwell Potter and Caliph de Burley. And then you've got the Irish like Ballyburn, Croke Park, Quai de Bourbon. So I don't really know how this 2.5 mile manifesto is going to shape up, but you'd probably be disappointed if there wasn't a couple better than it.
Quicker turnaround as well to Aintree this year is going to really make that, as you say, you have a really tough guess to even who's going to line up in that. So at least you have the security of knowing well, he's going there fresh. But you'd still have to say he would have to step up on what he's done so far.
One horse who looked very expensive after costing 450 grand at the Arcana sale was Mambo number 5. But to say he looked much better on Saturday. He looked really good, actually, quite exciting.
Yeah, they'd been scrambling around for the receipt, wouldn't they, after that Cheltenham run. But I know a lot of people will go back to what Mondo Man did wrong early on in the race, but actually I thought Mambo number 5 did plenty wrong early on. He was keen, he made a few novice errors at the first couple of hurdles, and I was really impressed. He's a big stamp of a horse. He'll definitely jump fences in the future. Ben Pauling, I think, is going to go kind of a softly approach, miss the Cheltenham Festival and head to Aintree. And like Dan just said, there is a quicker turnaround this year, and it does look as if we've got a good bunch of UK juvenile hurdles with East India Dock and Lalamba, but this lad will be waiting for him at Aintree, and I wouldn't sleep on him, really. Obviously, it was a good day for Ben Pauling and Ben Jones. It was the first leg of a treble. I was suitably impressed.
Physically, he's a gorgeous-looking individual. So you can understand why he costs a lot of money.
Yep.
But it was nice to see the engine working like that to go with the frame.
Because I think, realistically speaking, we've seen a lot of disappointing French recruits, especially expensive ones. I mean, Willie de Hall being the flag bearer for those who the world was expected and they've disappointed. And realistically, it's been quite a disappointing crop of French juveniles. Bear Lalamba has obviously emerged a bit later. So he did sort of travel like he used to do in France. He tanked into the race, and in France he didn't always see it out, but obviously did so here. Say 17 hands, I think they reported. So he's one of those juveniles you expect to have a long-term future. The form of this race in the context of the division as a whole, probably a bit subpar. I think he's still rated 128 after winning it. I think that tells you a lot. I think East India Dock, as of this morning, now rated 146. So a stone and below, the best of what we've seen in this division. Nice horse, nice prospect. What will he do for the remainder of the season in that division? Probably has to improve again, based on that bare form, you'd say.
I took a few pelters after the show last week when I suggested that Mondo Man might give Lalamba more of a race. I mean, this is the moment where you either apologise and say, yeah, I got that wrong, which I did, or you double down and you say, there will be a day for Mondo Man, and I'm going to double down. There will be a day for Mondo Man. I cannot believe, clearly he pulled too hard again. But then when I thought he was going to drop out the back of the screen turning in, having travelled quite nicely, then he's lost his position, looks like he's going to drop away, then he comes back again. I am certain that there's a good horse in there. It's there in black and white. The form is there on the flat. But he jumps well.
This is so glass half full, isn't it?
I can't wait for our
Convincing
first episode of the jump season next year, where you're putting him up for the Supreme.
Well, no,
because he's still going to be a maiden over hurdles.
I don't think you have to wait long, because it's quite possible we might be putting him up for the flat at some point.
Oh, that is true.
This is how mighty have fallen. Oh, the day will be a Plumpton handicap of 115 probably, but you will have your day. 4 to 7.
We will have a day.
We'll be there.
Let's hope. Well, he might. In fairness, I think Matt Chapman was speaking to Josh Moore on the weekend after the race, and Josh Moore said to Matt, there is a good horse in there, over jumps. We still think we might go for the Triumph Hurdle.
The thing about him is, a lot of these classy flat recruits don't often hurdle well, and that hinders them. He actually jumps quite well.
Just let him roll.
Does everything else wrong, though.
Yeah, exactly. I think change tactics, chuck him out in front and see if he settles.
I like that. I like that. And that's when he'll have his day. Probably.
At Plumpton.
Maycall, Plumpton, Grattan. That'll be the day.
2 young, rude men. Okay, the Dovecote Novices Hurdle, I thought, provided the most exciting winner of the day at Kempton last Saturday. I thought Tripoli Flyer, despite the fact that he didn't jump as well as you'd want him to, and a bit to the right, I thought what a horse, what an exciting horse for the future.
Well, that's kind of been him. They've talked about early in the season, just having to mind him. They knew the ability was there, but he wasn't going to be an immediate, top echelon performer. But the slow, gradual progression he's shown, as you say, that puts him right up there with the best of the British novice hurdlers, realistically. Now we're at 142. As you say, still does a fair bit wrong in his races, jumps out to his right. Obviously, the last he went through the top of it, but still had enough in hand to beat what was a decent field. Obviously, Miami Magic set a fair benchmark, Celtic Dino in behind. I think for the standard of British novice hurdlers in general, bar, say, Potter's Charm, the New Lion, that was kind of where we're at with that division. So it was a really good performance. Obviously, seemingly afterwards, Thurgood seemed more inclined to think about Aintree. The owner kind of backed that up. But then yesterday, seemingly, he's got thinking, oh, you know what, maybe he does deserve to go to Cheltenham, where that would be another step up, going the other way. Maybe that's a bit too soon. I'm giving his Aintree bumper form. Maybe Aintree is going to be more his track. But either way, I'll be with you. I think this was a really exciting performance. So if they can keep a lid on him, which seemingly is the issue, he's got a very bright future, a very big engine.
It was 16-1 non-runner no bet for the Supreme. There we are mentioning Cheltenham off the back of Kempton. How impressed were you?
Not as impressed as the two
okay.
of you. This was a bit of a time trial, wasn't it? Royce went off too quickly, and then Andershan took it up, and then Miami Magic took it up. It was a bit like a cycling time trial, really. I kind of thought it fell apart slightly. The thing with his jumping is he jumps right-handed and kind of was a bit novice-y, but he doesn't actually lose any ground. I think when you look at the race IQ data, he actually makes lengths at his hurdles in comparison to his rivals, which is good. If you're looking like that over the hurdles and you're making ground, imagine what you can do when you actually fly them. I'd want double the 16-1 for the Supreme in order for me to think about getting interested, to be honest.
Just one bit of information I found out about Tripoli Flyer. Laura Collett, the eventer, she has schooled him at home, and she said that he jumps beautifully at home. Doesn't jump left or right, concentrates when he's at home, when he's jumping, but for whatever reason, when he goes to the track, he's still very immature. The whole experience is still... And actually, when you see him in the paddock, he's a big, strong individual, and he looks a little bit babyish the way he goes about things.
Yeah.
And she said, actually, at home, when he's with other horses in the string and he's training, he's nice and relaxed. But when he's jumping at home, he's very straightforward. But he just needs to grow up. And also, she feels that he's going to be at his best when he goes to the fences. So
I think that backs up what they were saying earlier in the season about they knew they had a very talented horse on their hands. It was just about nursing that into him, and it's going to be a case of slowly. The only one I thought was probably half interesting future is Celtic Dino, who they're so insistent needs basically concrete to run on. Although he did actually have some okay form on soft ground, but seemingly the rain went against him here.
Travelled beautifully, didn't he?
He did again, and then potentially the soft ground has blunted his finishing effort. With a horse like that now, you really are kind of limiting yourself as to where you can go if you're insistent he needs good ground. Like, is that a horse you keep on the summer? Is that a horse you go for something like a Galway hurdle? Something like that during the summer. Obviously, ideally, Sam Thomas, you'd almost be thinking Welsh champion, but that's kind of where you'd think. But any ounce of rain, that probably scuppers that plan. So he's still got races in him, I'd be convinced. But just the way they're talking about the ground conditions needing to be a certain way, slightly temper enthusiasm. But interested to see how they're campaigning with that in mind.
I like how you've helped me link to the next race, which was Sam Thomas's success again in that big handicap chase at Kempton, having won it in 2023 with Our Power, who ran well in this year's renewal. Katate Dori. Now, I embarrassed myself once again, as I often have on television, when I said, reading about what Sam Thomas had planned for how Charlie Deutsch would ride, it was a slowly smuggle him into the race and get him there. And then coming down the back straight, he's gone.
That's all right. You sounded clever for 2 fences. This
Better than normal.
This was a brilliant training performance. Like, I looked back at this horse because he's kind of come from nowhere. He's 0 from 7 over hurdles, beaten off a mark of 110, and that was only in December. And then since then, won 3 of his 4 chase starts, improved 27 pounds to 137. Just amazing, really. Jumped well apart from 4 out. If this was the old days of me watching races in bookies with my betting slip in my hand, like, I'd have thrown away my Highland bet after 2 fences because the ground went against him, his jumping then went to pot, and I thought I'd have absolutely no hope. And then just rounding the bend, the commentator got me really excited because he was like, and Highland's creeping into it, and I'd have been scrabbling around just trying to find which bin I'd just thrown it in. But really, Highland stayed on, but was never ever going to trouble Katate Dori. There was one massive eye catcher for me in behind, and that was Cheltenham. Now, the form book will tell you that he's pulled up, and so far this season, in his other 2 starts, has been beaten 26 lengths and 24 lengths. But I thought he travelled well into it, jumped well into it, and just didn't get the trip. I've checked this morning, he's gone down £2 to 134. Now, he's not going to be winning any of these Spring Festival races, but the way that Dan Skelton's going for this trainer championship, I'm sure there's going to be a pot somewhere, like a Utoxeter. He's going to target one of those races, and I'm quite keen on helping.
I was amazed he wasn't in the Newbury Gold Cup, to be honest, this weekend. I thought that was kind of his season target.
Yeah.
Based obviously, he won it last year, loves Newbury. I was surprised they ran him, especially when the ground kind of went soft, but I love it. He's a strong traveller, needs a big galloping track, I think, to be really seen at his best.
Yeah.
What was your overall impression of Katate Dori?
Yeah, I mean, as Steve mentioned it, he's been beaten off marks 110 over hurdles, and I was one of the many fools who fell for him many times in handicap hurdles, thinking there's more ability there, and he just never showed it, but offensively turned him inside out. I was there at Wincanton when he was second in the Somerset National, and he went off a very short price. He was the only horse anyone went to the back. Obviously, King Turgeon was his main rival in the market, obviously arriving on the back of the roll. And I thought there was a lot of positive to take out of that. I know he was beaten at a short price, but I think that first experience in a real competitive big field handicap just seemed to take him off his feet early doors, made a few early errors, didn't get into a rhythm and still finished as close as he did. I thought there was a lot to like about that. Now, did I take that and did I use it and back him at the weekend? Of course not, because that would just be too sensible to do. But I was obviously surprised by the manner of victory, but not surprised that the man to get him to do that was Charlie Deutsch, who I think is superb on that kind of horse. Yeah. And I think his move to almost take him forward at an early stage, because he was so wide early as well, just to get him settled, get a bit of confidence as it's fencing, because it has been an Achilles heel in big fields. And then just thought, okay, no, we're rolling here. Take him forward, let him do his own thing. Clearly a horse on a steep upward curve. Where they go from here will be interesting, because he's got multiple Cheltenham entries that you'll get into every race off 137, the ultimate, the Kimmy National Hunt Chase. Whether they'll turn him around quickly, let's see. But yeah, steep upward curve and really emphatic winner.
Yeah. The thing I liked about the race is that it was a race back in my era, chaps. It was always a really strong race, potential Gold Cup horses running in it, or horses that were of that class anyway. Go back to Desert Orchid and Dock Links Express, etc. There's some really top class horses running in that. It was nice to see a really strong renewal of that race. Okay, Highland, Larry's Bar at the top of the mark. Larry's Bar obviously pulled up with an issue,
Bled, didn't he?
so unfortunately not able to show his best. But those are two nice horses, and it was quite a good race. So hopefully it'll work out in the future. The Ida also took place on the weekend, and Knockanor. I thought O'Connell was going well. I thought Anglers Crag had a good chance, but unfortunately unseated down at the start and was withdrawn. But Knockanor has 16 lengths, but my goodness, all the way up the straight, there was only one horse in it.
Yeah, it's one of those where he's run over 3 miles before, and to my mind, I didn't necessarily convince it was the strongest of stayers. Yeah. So he won over 2.5 miles. And Ryan Potter said after the race, well, everyone who's ever ridden him said he wants further. So it was obvious that he wanted 4 miles, but clearly he does. And they've described him as a bit of a monkey, apparently. He works well at home. You'd think he'd be the best horse in the yard. And bearing in mind they've got Jotois, who's obviously an old Rome winner in the past, that would be a fair endorsement, but hasn't always shown it. The marathon tripped is what he's always wanted. Up £10 to a mark 127. I wouldn't have spotted it. I don't think many people necessarily spotted it, but no argument about who the best horse on the day was. No,
great day for Ryan Potter and for Freddie Mitchell as well.
Yeah, this is one of those races where you see an impressive winner and you go back through the form book and go, what did I miss? And then, like Dan said, 1 over 2.5, never raced on further than 3 miles. And yeah, I wouldn't have picked him out. He was off a low weight, wasn't it? 10-4 Katate Dori, one off 10-5. Maybe it was just a day where you needed low weights. But yeah, I thought O'Connell came into it in form, had no concern about the ground, had no concern about the trip, and well and truly bumped into one.
Lots of other good horses and performances to mention in the last week. Who would like to start? And you can go either Britain, Ireland, or even further afield.
I think William Money you have to touch on. Obviously, always given the impression that he's very talented, and Barry Connell we know in his bullish nature. Last year, he was the best bumper horse in Ireland, and to be fair, for a stage, you could see why. Then disappointing slightly in the spring. It's been a bit of a slowly coming together over hurdles. He's very hard on himself, has been very keen, seemed to put it all together. I say in that listed novice hurdle, won as he liked. I say he still can be quite hard on himself, but does seem to be putting it all together. Now, he's going to the Supreme. Barry Connell's now saying he wouldn't swap him for anything, which I wouldn't expect anything else. And look, clearly a horse with a very bright future, probably going over the fences sooner rather than later at the age of 7. And I would say to be at his absolute best would need soft ground. So may well get that in the Supreme, we'll know, but still has, I'd say, a fair way to get to Kubik to board standard. See Jade de Grugy as well, made her come back. The same card, a fairly short price, but one as she probably should have. I'm surprised they've gone down this route with her. I know she probably had issues early in the season, but I remember when Willie Mullins ran Gala Marceau in the race last year on similarly testing ground and was almost kicking himself after the race that, why did I give her such a hard race on deep ground? So whether that will just impact her come the mare's hurdle, see, she may well be market leader regardless if Friday's Head and Lossiemouth go on. And then he unleashed Game of Inches as well in the bumper, the third bumper favourite in, 3 weeks now? It's very much a division in flux. Again, he would be a horse I could almost see going over fences straight away after his bumper, a bit like Factor 5 as a 6-year-old. He was described by Paul Cashman, who trained him in point to points, as the best horse he's had. So clearly had been held in some regard, looked very impressive. 3-1 for the bumper. That's probably skinny enough in a very strange division, but very exciting prospect. I can definitely see him going straight over fences, given he's 6 already.
Just a word about William Money, who is 12-1 non-runner no bet for the Supreme with Bet365, 16-1 elsewhere. Jay de Grugy 5-2 with Bet365 for the Mare's Hurdle. There's some other good performances to talk about. Anything that you wanted to pick up on that Dan had mentioned?
It was funny, wasn't it? We said a couple of weeks ago that Willie Mullins hasn't really got that stronger, stronger bumper contenders,
hurdles, wasn't it? And then the DRF happened.
Yeah, I'm sure Paul Townend sat at home now going, I don't really know which second string I'm now going to ride. I thought Don't Rightly Know was really good, beat the 2 Gavin Cromwell mares. Just really nice. Progressive 10-year-old for Polly Gundry. Now 3 from 3 over fences. I thought Harry Cobden once again showed all his quality in the saddle there. Nemean Lion beat Steel Ally in the National Spirit. I thought that was a really good ride by Richard Patrick. You can tell that he knew the horse well. Stayed on strongly at the finish to win that. Bacchanalian won't be heading to the Cheltenham Festival. He's a horse that I really like. He won that Grade 3 at Naas. He's a big juvenile hurdler. His future is definitely going to be over fences, and I think soft ground's important to him. So whenever you're looking maybe next season at spring targets and things, just keep that in the back of your mind, because they clearly don't have Cheltenham as the be-all or end-all. He obviously won that race that always throws up the Boodles' favourite, and then literally the day after they went, nah, we're not going to go for that.
It's too obvious.
Exactly. There's been a couple of form boosts for Work Ahead. Jacob's Ladder and William Money have both paid a compliment to him. I do quite like him at an each-way price for the Supreme. I think if anything's going to upset Kopek de Board, he could be that one. And then we have to talk about the Saudi Cup, don't we, Rich?
What a race.
I know we talk about jumps
What a
racing,
race.
but it was just an incredible race.
Forever Young, who had high-class form in the Kentucky Derby and the Breeders' Cup Classic, just getting the better of Romantic Warrior, horse running for the first time properly on dirt. He had trained on a dirt surface in Hong Kong, but it's a different story racing on it. There's a lot of chat after the race about James McDonald's move on Romantic Warrior around the straight. Do you have a view?
I thought if he was on a horse that had ran on dirt before, I thought it was a poor ride, because he could have tracked up the inside, waited for a gap. My thought is whether he'd have gone through that gap on his first time on dirt. So James McDonald took the sensible option, I think, of going wide in order to make sure that he got a run and make sure that the horse actually would pick up. But in hindsight, would he have gone a less wide route? Then yes, probably. It reminded me of Joseph O'Brien on Australia in the Irish Champion Stakes, like making sure you think you're on the best horse in the race, make sure you get a run, and Ryan Moore sneaks up your inside and beats you.
I thought the opposite, actually, from what you would think. I thought because he's riding a turf horse, you hold on for as long as you can on the dirt, because dirt horses are accustomed to putting it all out there for a long period of time. Like Forever Young, I mean, he was off the bridle for 6 furlongs of the Kentucky, maybe more in Kentucky Derby, and similarly in the Classic. He's used to that. Whereas Romantic Warrior is a travel sprint. I'd have liked to have seen him hold on to him. When he took it up, I did think the race was over. I've got to be honest.
So did J-Mac. He looked at the screen.
Yeah, he did. He did. Were you even watching?
No. Honestly, you could have said it. He could have been completely wrong, and I would have just been like, "Yeah, I agree." Literally.
What do you think of the early sectionals of that race, Dan?
Lightning.
I presume you enjoyed the Neom Turf Cup, though.
Is that a real race name? Or is that... Nothing could go over my head more.
Okay, well, it was a terrific race. Forever Young beating Romantic Warrior in the Saudi Cup, but also we've seen some quality racing in Britain and Ireland over the jumps. And that has been this week's Racing Recap. Now, before we get into our weekend preview, just to let you know that our sponsor, Bet365, have a best odds guaranteed offer. It's available on every single UK and Irish race from 8 a.m. on the day of the race. If you take a price and the SP is bigger, Bet365 will pay you at the bigger odds. Full T's and C's can be found on the website. And a reminder that our Cheltenham preview this year takes place on Monday, so not that far away, the 3rd of March. It's at the Drayton Court Hotel in Ealing. Steve, myself, Gavin Lynch, Willie Twiston-Davies and Pat Cooney will be looking ahead to the best of the action at the Cheltenham Festival. 6:30 for a 6:45 p.m. start. It's free to oddschecker unlimited subscribers, and it includes a half-time pie and pint. So hopefully see some of you for that. And now we turn our attention to what's coming up this weekend. And as I mentioned at the start of the show, a very good Bet365 sponsored card up at Kelso. Let's have a look at the Morebattle Hurdle. Now, it's not the race that many of us thought it would be, because Joyeuse isn't running, and one or two others that maybe we half expected to see also not involved in the race. So let's take a look at the betting for that Bet365 Morebattle. Vicio, who won at the Dublin Racing Festival, is a 5-1 favourite, just ahead of Favour and Fortune, who ran well last time. Tell Her the Name, 6-1 along with Favour and Fortune. Cracking Rhapsody, 10s. Durancon, 10s. Florida Dreams, 12s. Slugger, 12s. 14-1 Al Nalam and 16s. Bar those. Dan, where would you like to start?
I think Vicio was probably laid out for the DRF, for bearing in mind the family connections there. Yeah. So whether she'll even come over, I'm not so sure. Obviously, Tell Her the Name is always a horse I've thought has a race like this in him, uncertainly. The ground is probably going to go on the better side, doesn't seem much rain around, so that should dry out in his favour. I just can't quite fathom where he's been. He's missed seemingly every big 2-mile handicap under the sun. Obviously, he ran in the Fighting Fifth and just hasn't been seen, hasn't been entered, didn't get declared anywhere. So that would be a concern for me. I think the O'Neill team actually have another one in there I'm actually quite interested in, Willful. I think it's around 16-1. Now, obviously, the concern would be Tell Her the Name could be the representative. I'm not sure, but I think this race could really suit Willful, who's a massive price, still really lightly raced and progressed quite a lot towards the back end of last season, ran during the summer, so good ground very much on his side. Beat the Willie Mullins train only a matter of time under a double penalty on one of those starts over 2.5 miles, then given a bit of a break. To my mind, just hasn't been seeing out his races over 2 mile free on 2 starts this season. Seasonal reappearance, very much still there, wasn't really given a hard time once headed. And then I think it was Ascot behind the race Alto Belly won before winning again. He looked the most likely winner turning for home. He had them all at it in behind. He was still there travelling until about the last, where just headed, beaten 6 lengths. Been dropped a couple of pounds for that, and he's shown a real liking for sharp left-handed tracks and going forward, which suits Kelso down to the ground. Drying ground will suit him. I think the run style will suit. I think he's got a massive chance if he's their chosen representative, and he's a very big price. So for an unexposed horse, I think can relish conditions. I'd be quite strong in his chances. All
right, Willful 16-1, as you say, with Bet365 for that Bet365 Morebattle Hurdle. Steve, what do you like?
Similar kind of things around it. I wouldn't like Vicio for this. Up obviously in the weights after that DRF victory. Danny Mullins is so important on her as well. Feet out the irons at the start. Clearly a quirky character. The ground's important to a few of these. I think, they're calling it good to soft, soft in places. A few showers around, but nothing substantial. I thought Favour and Fortune ran better than I expected on soft ground in the Betfair Hurdle. I look back at his form, though. He always seems to be better after like a month off, and this is only a 3-week turnaround, so that would slightly put me off his chances. Tell Her the Name, I had the same things. Thought he ran really well in the Fighting Fifth, but where has he been? Cracking Rhapsody won this last year, but £13 higher. That will make it a lot more difficult. It's worth remembering Durancon and Orcam Risk are both jocked up for the Newbury handicap hurdle rather than this as well. And the one that I kind of landed on was Al Nalam. Finished second on his first 2 starts this season on good ground, so that'll be no worry, beating less than a length in both of those. He then had a wind-up in November, won on New Year's Day at Southall, made all at 100, off a mark of 129, so prominent racer at Kelso, as Dan said, that's definitely going to be in his favour. I thought he was value for more than the length and 3/4 victory that day. He's been put up £4, which I thought was quite lenient, and he's around 14-1 with Bet365. I thought, that's quite a big price.
Yeah, he's one of the 2 horses that I like. I mean, Tell Her the Name was another obvious one, but similarly, there's that nagging doubt at the back of your mind. What's Tell Her the Name's issue? Why have you not seen this horse since the Fighting Fifth? But there's definitely a good horse in there, but there are questions. Al Nalam, 2 from 3 as well at Kelso. I liked Al Nalam. I put him up when he was placed at Ascot early in the season. The other thing about it, I'm worrying how they're going to ride Al Nalam. If they hold Al Nalam up, I'll be more confident about a big show. I don't want Al Nalam to be a target for them. And remember when he won first time, the first win at Kelso, held up, I mean, obviously against inferior rivals, but held up, travelled, and then won by an absolute street. So I would like to see a decent pace. Alnalam held up, and I would hope that, even though he's gone up in the handicap for that win a little bit at Southall, beating Balambar, who didn't run well again, going up to Morebattle, didn't frank the form, but I think Alnalam's definitely an improver. I imagine that because of his good record at Kelso, that after winning at Southall, this would have been the plan to come straight here. So 14-1 Alnalam I thought was also a decent bet, but 16-1, 14-1, and we're sort of stirring, tell her the name, not sure about that. But those are our thoughts for the Bet365 Morebattle Hurdle. Also on the same card, the Bet365 Premier Chase. Let's have a look at the market for that. Obviously, Iroko's got a couple of entries on the weekend. Grey Dawning's the 4-5 favourite. Iroko 11-10. El Elefante 10s. Quick Wave, I think, has got a couple of entries as well. 10-1s, and then bigger prices, Spyglass Hill and Barons Land. Straightforward for Grey Dawning or not?
No, I want to take him on, to be honest. I know he's clear on ratings, but the whole season's been a bit of a mess, hasn't it? I'm not convinced all is right. He's out of the Ryanair, he's in the Gold Cup, he's going to Kelso, he's going to Aintree. He looked a really consistent chaser, but his race in the King George was obviously over after the first, really. The ground also would be a slight question mark. I look back at it, his record with good in the description is 2-1-3, non-runner pulled up, whereas on soft ground, it's 7 wins, 2 seconds, a third and a full. So he's much better on soft ground. Now, obviously, he could outclass his rivals here. I'm just not a fan of Iroko, so I'd be looking at taking him on if he was to run here anyway. I didn't expect to see Quick Wave in this. I know Venetia Williams is a genius, but she's a 12-year-old mare, been off 742 days. The last time we saw her on the racetrack was beating Snow Leopardess in the Grand National Trial. Like, that would be some training performance in order to get her back. I thought El Elefante was the one that I was really interested in. Gets on really well with Patrick Wadge. She's ran 5 times this season, twice under Derek Fox and was beaten, 3 times under Patrick Wadge, and has won all 3 of those. Won by 5.5 lengths at Ayr on her penultimate start, then won last time. She's well worthy of a rating of 136. She's the pace angle in the race. She'll make the run-in. She's got a really good record in small fields as well. And standout 10-1 with Bet365. I thought she's definitely worth a bet.
Just make sure he weighs in this week.
Yeah.
Please. Do you agree that the top 2 are vulnerable?
The issue is probably the ground for Grey Dawning, as Steve mentioned. It's not only just non-runner a few times, but going into the Betfair Chase, obviously they were trying to get a prep run. I think the Colin Parker was very much touted. I think the ground was only good to soft and they didn't run him there. So the fact with the drying forecast, are they going to run? They've almost backed themselves into having to, unless they want to go straight to Aintree, which is then a real leap from pulling up in the King George. So they could almost be backed into the corner unless the ground is rattling quick. So that'll be interesting. Iroko, where does he ever turn up? Like he's been very enigmatically trained. We've known the National's been the target for a long time, but even still at this stage, it's getting, where's Iroko? It's like, where's Wally, new version of where's Iroko? It really is getting me at fan. So I can see the case for Elefante. It's like the solid one in the race. Probably won't be a race I have a bet in. Grey Dawning, if turning up, and if on 75-80% should win. But there are those caveats.
Yeah. Going back to your point, Steve, it hasn't been the season, obviously, that up until the second to last in the Betfair Chase, it looked like everything was going smoothly. And then since then, I mean, even from the run from the last to the line, just hasn't been, something's not quite right. And sometimes I worry about a race like that, taking it out of a horse too much, especially when they said they weren't going to go originally to the King George. And then they did. I know he didn't have a race, but still they went.
I just don't know if this has kind of got into Dan Skelton's head. Oh, we need a prep. Oh, we're going to miss the prep. Oh, we're going to come there straight away. And we're definitely not going to that race. Oh, we're going to go to that race. And it just, the whole season just seems to have, I don't know whether there's issues at home and it's kind of half a bit of a cover-up and then puts it on the owner and says, the owner will run him wherever he wants to win. And it just seems a bit of a bizarre season for him.
Yeah, I couldn't believe he ran the King George. I think after the line in the Betfair Chase, like, right, we won't see that horse till the Cotswolds. Cotswolds Gold Cup. It just seemed so obvious, but they were seemingly convinced he was bouncing at home, but obviously we didn't really get to see that to fruition. But yeah, it's not been the season they probably planned for at the start.
It's such a shame after the novice season he had, obviously all those great races with Ginny's Destiny, etc. But interesting to see who lines up and how it all pans out for that Bet365 Premier Chase. The Bet365 Premier Novices Hurdle on the same card. Chart topper 7-2 for the Willie Mullins team. Good and Clever 4-1. Castle Carrock 6-1. Dedicated Hero 6-1, along with Listen to Your Heart 13-2. Vanderpoel and 9-1. Bar those. Where would you like to start here?
Patrick Mullins was very glowing about Chart Topper, very strangely so for a horse who ran in 3 bumpers for Willie Mullingar and didn't win any of them. So it almost caught me a bit by surprise that back in the day of thinking, oh, this is the Cheltenham horse, he's going to be a 140 horse. He's got a very peculiar action. He really does flick off the turf, so the better ground I think is going to suit him. Obviously beat a 125 rated horse last time out, did so comfortably. I'd say, bearing in mind how they've been targeting the UK and enigmatic campaigning, it would be a logical target for him. Good and Clever's the best maiden in training, so we've been told many a time. Obviously, we'd just like to go and see him win a race, and maybe I'd almost drop him into a lower grade, just get a win, and then build from there. But I think Van der Poel may be one of the more interesting longer-term prospects for Ben Pauling. They always seemingly thought a lot of him. So he made his early debut when he beat George's Lad, who won a maiden in style next time out. Rubber Ball was back in 3rd. I backed Rubber Ball that day. And now looking at it, I'm like, how on earth has he only finished 3rd there based on what he's achieved so far? But the form for Van der Poel's clearly working out. Backed that up under a penalty last time out in a much weaker race. Yard won this with personal ambition. So I'm surprised he's as big a price as he is. He is jocked up currently, so I'd assume he'd run here. It seems they did actually name check the race after winning under a penalty as well before going on to Aintree. So they've got high ambitions. So yeah, Van der Poel as it stands, it'll be interesting to see how this race stacks up because it'll be really competitive. They all stand their ground. But Van der Poel, for me, I think is a really interesting long-term prospect.
Van der Poel, 30-2 with Bet365. Steve?
I really like Van der Poel as well.
Okay.
Lovely.
I won't go over everything that Dan said. There's a few extra things. Obviously, was bought for 90 grand following a point-to-point win. That point-to-point win's worked really well. He beat Champagne Jury by 10 lengths. Champagne Jury has then joined Gavin Cromwell. He's now 20-1 for the champion bumper. So you often look back at that point-to-point form and kind of throw it away, but actually that's worked out well. They've gone the softly approach with Mambo number 5, but I think they only had him a month after that point-to-point and chucked him straight into a maiden hurdle in January. So they obviously knew what they had. The Ben Pauling stable are also absolutely flying. 50% strike rate at the minute, 11 winners from their last 22 runners. And if you look back at the replay of his last run, he won at 1-8, and his last 2 jumps were terrible. Like you would put that as a negative, but he jumped really well before that. And I think it was just the fact that he was against inferior opposition, not really concentrating late on. And yeah, I really like him, and I had him shorter than 13-2.
All right. I'm interested in Henry Daly's horse, Lagan Hill, who's only run twice. He's won both times. He beat Glyn Bray, who won just last week. And the other win, he had a horse, a decent enough yardstick, and Big Ginge comfortably behind in 3rd. So a couple of wins, totally unexposed. When Henry Daly gets horses that are unexposed and he steps them up to good company, I'd rather be with them until they get beat because you think of the horses that he's had, the likes of Hillcrest, who went on those winning runs and sort of developed as they went along. So I thought 10-1 for this race, where you're still learning about a lot of these horses. You have no idea how good they all are. Decorated Hero was another one that I wanted to mention because I liked his win at Haydock, where I felt like he really found it was a mile 7.5 furlongs. But his best part came right at the end of that race, and if it was a decent gallop at Kelso, the finish of that race, the 2 mile at Kelso, should really suit him. So he was another one interested in. But a Lagan Hill, a 10-1, I thought was the play for me in that Bet365 Premier Novices Hurdle. Let's have a look at the Greatwood Gold Cup, which takes place at Newbury on the weekend. Billy the Big Red is the 4-1 favourite. Can Do Kid 5-1. Meeting the Waters 6-1. So obviously with Bet365. Iroko 7s. Lamilos 15-2. Scarface 8s. And Vincenzo the same price. Not sure about the trip. And then it's 10-1 bar those. Steve, kick us off.
I thought Billy the Real Big Red had booked his kind of ticket to the Cheltenham Festival after his run last time by Jaguar. So I wouldn't be convinced that he'd be running. Can Do Kid's obviously in here, brings really good course form, but this is surely a tee-up for the Grand National. He's also £12 higher than last year. I'm going to chance Saint Segal, and I haven't been with him before, so I feel as if I'm okay.
Welcome to the club of
pain. Now, he won by 11 lengths over this course and distance on his penultimate start, and then finished a close second at Musselburgh in the Scottish Champion Chase. Now, he's only £2 higher here, but everything seems to be kind of clicking into place, and I thought, a double-figure price here. I thought he was probably worth a go because I haven't been in the club previously.
We'll report back next week and we'll see how that gets on.
I'm surprised because Martitour's in the betting. I'm surprised you haven't given Martitor a shout. It's one of your favourite horses.
I know. He's one of my favourite horses at Ascot. I just think, like many of Venetia's, like Victorino, I just think they just run their best races at Ascot.
All right, Saint Segal, 10-1 with Bet365 for the Greatwood Gold Cup. What do you like?
It's an interesting race. And again, who's actually going to line up? Can do Kiddo at the 12 stone towards the head of the market would concern me. Obviously, we know his main aim's the Grand National one. Looking like the ground's going to be on the testing side. It's already soft, heavy in places, more rain forecast. So I expect a fair test here. So looking at one a bit lower down the weights, what Margaret's Legacy at a big price might be interesting.
12s.
Very different profile coming into compared to a lot of these who have high class form. Very much been an improver since moving to Warren Greatrex. Had been with Tim Vaughan having moved from France. Had just reportedly struggled to get him really any fit. So you look at patchy form there. They did achieve something, but really on an upward curve since joining Warren Greatrex, 2 from 2. Beat Bad at Southall, who have finally delivered and actually won a race, a bit like Sun Gao. He was very much joining that category of horses. You've got so much ability, why aren't you winning? But he went and franked that form, up another £6 to a mark 125, but likes a galloping left-handed track, still very much on an upward curve for this yard. And Warren Greatrex said something quite interesting. He thinks the horse is just now growing in confidence. Now he's got his head in front. Looks like this is going to be where he starts to thrive, and he'll be off a really low weight on really deep ground.
Okay, so a couple of big prices in this race. I was actually interested in Billy the Big Red if he ran, because I actually think this sort of track would suit him better than Cheltenham. Nothing travelled better than he did, and he jumped really well. He's a really good jumper. I think when he ran at Exeter, he just leant a little bit out to the left, whereas I think at Cheltenham, banger, some really smooth travelling performances. And I was thinking maybe in their minds they're thinking maybe a flatter track, galloping like Newbury is, rather than that test at Cheltenham, the uphill, downhill test at Cheltenham, not quite as... so if he ran, I like Billy the Big Red.
He just ran in that time form race that just throws out winners everywhere at the Cheltenham Festival.
He'd be a worthy favourite if he lines up, for sure.
I just didn't think he'd run, personally. It's a bit like you with Larry's Bar. I kind of looked at him and went, why are you looking at running?
Please go anywhere else.
Yeah, why are you looking at running?
You're thinking maybe they're thinking this is a better opportunity to win a race. So if he did, I'd be keen on him. We'll have a look at the Grimthorpe that takes place at Doncaster, also on Saturday. High Mac for Harry Fry, 5-1, joint favourite along with White Rhino. Some Scope is 11-2, winner of the Roland Merrick. Surrey Quest 13-2. We've all been caught 13-2. The Nip Hand 8-1 and Twig 8-1 from the Ashes 9s. King Turgeon 10s 14-1 or bigger. The remainder. Steve, start us off.
I'd be with White Rhino, I think. Won a couple of races last season over hurdles, and then it looked as if he'd been disappointing. But if you'd actually go back through that form, he finished third behind Beachcomber at Huntingdon. He was 120 that day and is now 136 rated chaser. Then finished fourth behind Gwenny May Boy in that valuable handicap at Toxeter. That rival's now rated 149 and won the Rendlesham. So actually those defeat over hurdles have worked out really well. Won his first 2 starts over fences and then was pitched into the Corto Star behind the Jukebox Man and Highland. Henry Brook is jocked up for this. The slight concern is that obviously he unseated that day and they've also got him in over hurdles. So maybe the schooling hasn't gone as well as they were hoping. But I thought his win at Haydock in December gave the impression that he would still be well handicapped with a mark 141. It isn't like the Greenall and Guerrero team to pitch them right in at Grade 1 company. So he obviously has loads of ability, and I thought he was probably the one to be with if declared, but he wouldn't be an anti-post proposition for me.
Yeah, I like White Rhino as well. What about you?
I was just surprised he was on a mission from the National Hunt Chase entries. Obviously, he would have qualified for that race. I think so he would he have had to qualify for 3 miles. But either way, that was a target they were touting. Then didn't appear, now appears here. It's as Steve mentioned, he's in over hurdles as well. Yeah. Just a few alarm bells ringing. He'd be the one I'd like because he has that unexposed profile, very progressive. But I found this a really tricky race. Obviously, Some Scope towards the head of the market. Loves this kind of ground we're going to get. Loves this kind of track. But was a brutal second in this last year. If you remember the race, only 2 finished against Does He Know. Actually ran unusually well, bearing in mind the conditions that day. I found this tricky. I thought the Nip Hand, if he was to go here and not We've All Been Caught, would be interesting. He's 3 from 4 at Doncaster, seems to love this kind of track. He would be the play present, but because of the few unknowns in here, anti-post, who's going to run, just let it be for now. I'll happily revisit at the declaration stage, I think. Yeah,
there are a few in here that just know. I mean, there are a couple of former winners of the race, Moroder and Under Supervision. Surrey Quest, I thought would have been interesting, but then last time out he ran a really funny race at Morebattle. He looked like he was in trouble and then sort of plugged on. And
he's becoming that kind of horse, isn't he? Like
disappointing.
Eye catcher. He needs further, needs shorter.
Can't work it out. Yeah. So again, if White Rhino ran in this race, I thought he would be the one. Lots of other good races, lots of other interesting horses out and about this weekend or this week. Anything else that you want to mention, Dan?
Yes, Steve touched, I think, Durancon, if he ran in the Newbury race, I think that's going to suit him much more than Kelso would. Newbury, galloping track, heavy ground, I think would be much more suitable than Kelso, sharp track, good ground. 127, I still think, is lenient. Slight caveat would be the yard form. So he started very well, just seemingly petering off, but I'd have no doubt he's a better horse than mark 127. And on Newbury on the Friday as well, Mr. Hope Street, if he goes to the 3-mile race, he's another one who's entered in various places. But I think last time out, despite getting beaten, he showed he's still very much on the upward curve over a trip probably shorter than ideal and a track sharper than ideal. Yeah. Of the 3 miles, heavier ground again, I think he can resume that progression as well.
Okay, a couple to bear in mind. Steve, what about you?
Just one at Newbury on Saturday, the 2:30, the novice handicap chase. Jasmine de Grugy has just a string of ones. Yeah. Won final 3 starts over hurdles, 2 from 2 over fences this year, bids for a 6-timer. I'm just not sure an £8 rise will stop him.
Okay, well, there's one horse that I'm interested in that race who's actually also got multiple entries, 2 entries, and that's Leader in the Park for Ben Pauling. Won his last couple of starts and looked like, the old cliche, I'm going to use it, but it looks like the pennies dropped with that horse. I mean, you obviously know, especially because you and I both follow Classic Anthem in the race at Warwick, travelled really nice, but I thought Leader in the Park hit the line really hard. That was obviously 2.5 miles. He's won a point-to-point. He's got 1 entry at Kelso over 2 miles, 5.5 furlongs, 1 entry at Newbury over 2 miles, 7.5 furlongs. Personally, I'd like to see him at Newbury over 2 miles, 7.5, because I think considering the way he's won his last couple of starts, I like the fact that I think there's more stamina there. I think there's more to come from him over further. So I'll be interested to see where he turns up, what happens with Leader in the Park. So that's another one to mention, maybe clashing with one of Steve's selection, Jasmine de Grugy. Okay, I think that's it in terms of our overall look, but we still have our best bets of the weekend to come. But before we get into our best bets of the weekend, just to let you know of a free-to-play 6 horses challenge. It is available every weekend with free spins on offer if you get 2 or 3 selections correct. Prize pools available for 5 and 4 correct predictions, as well as a jackpot for all 6. T's and C's apply. So time for our best bets of the weekend. And Dan, as usual, being our guest, gets the chance to go first.
Very kind. And it's a race we haven't covered. If you go to the 220 at Kelso, it's a handicap hurdle over 2 mile 5 furlongs. Ace of Spades, I think, is really interesting for the Skeltons and the Noel Feely Racing Syndicate. Dan Skelton is an expert at targeting this kind of race, I feel. It's an ITV race. Harry Skelton's jocked up, so we know the value that's represented there. And this is just under 16 grand to the winner. And I think I look at Lamilos a couple of weeks ago where he was in a veterans handicap for 18 grand. He was ready for that day. They get him ready for these pots, and ultimately that's why he's doing what he is in the trainer's title. But he's a really interesting horse, had solid bumper form behind Wade Out, beat Junker Dallier, that's worked out quite well. He's been an improver over hurdles, and they always suggested he would be. A couple of early runs in the season had promise. They were convinced this is going to be a horse for the spring, handicaps later on. Probably one of the weaker maiden hurdles we'll ever see at Cheltenham. Not going to take that form on real. This is standout, has to be well handicapped. But followed up under a penalty at this track last time out. Again, I think that's interesting placing. They sent him to Kelso. Then they've come back for this race. Obviously not an insignificant journey, already jocked up. Only rated 123, and as I say, all the comments suggest this was going to be a horse that would just keep improving. I don't think there's all that much depth to it. Looks like he's going to run. I think he's around the 3-1, 7-2 mark early stage. He just looks primed to run a really big race. Okay, and that's for the Bet365 handicap hurdle at Kelso on Saturday. Ace of Spades, currently 3-1 as we speak today, recording this podcast. Steve?
Mine's going to come in the Bet365 Premier Chase. I just think there's enough to take on Grey Dawn at the top of the market on the better ground. I don't particularly like Iroko, and whether he's going to turn up is a question mark as well. It'll be some training performance from Venetia Williams to get Quick Wave to win, a 12-year-old mare, after 742 days off the track. And I'm going to chance El Alafante at 10-1. 3 from 3 this season under Patrick Wadge. Won by 5.5 lengths at Ayr on a penultimate start. Won last time. Is worthy of her rating of 136. She's the pace angle, small field suit her, and at 10-1, I'll be with El Alafante.
Okay, well, I was trying to find a horse that was going to run, first of all, which was awkward because quite a few of the horses I like have got multiple entries. I like Leader in the Park, he's got 2 entries. I like Billy the Real Big Red, but I'm definitely not sure. I'm not sure whether they're definitely going to go to Newbury and go to Cheltenham instead. And so because of that, by a process of elimination, I'm hoping that Henry Daly runs Lagan Hill in the Bet365 Premier Novices Hurdle at Kelso. I really like this horse. He's had a couple of runs. He's won both those starts. his form is pretty good so far. He beat Glyn Bray, who was a winner recently for the Twiston Davies team. And prior to that, he won a decent race as well, where the third horse, Big Ginge, has got some decent form with some smart horses. And I like Henry Daly's horses when they are unbeaten and progressive. When he pitches them up at a high level, they're normally underrated and undervalued. And he's 10-1 with Bet365 for that race. I thought he's got the ability to run better than a 10-1 shot in that race at Kelso. So just to recap, Ace of Spades at Kelso, El Elefante at Kelso, and Lagan Hill at Kelso on a day sponsored by Bet365. Would you have guessed that? In summary, are you out and about this week? Are you going to go racing at all? Or are you just going to keep your powder dry for that thing that we're not talking about?
Indeed, yeah, the magical sea. Well, it's handicap reveal day today, so that'll be a lot of time spent digging through that. Indeed. That's going to be, bearing in mind there's now 11 handicaps at the Cheltenham Festival, it's going to take some serious doing, but that'll be the main focus and building onto that, and I'll be there Tuesday, Wednesday in a couple of weeks' time. And
by the way, congratulations on your Racing TV
debut
that you made with a big prize
winner. You let me get it in. Yeah, Chicago Storm is a horse I will remember forever. 25-1. Class 5 handicap hurdles. Apparently they're my forte. So yeah, well, they actually invited me back on, but I think Chicago Storm has a lot to do with that. So I owe him my career.
Well, listen, from someone who has once given a 50-1 shot as a no-hoper and watched it win, I can tell you, when you get a 25-1 winner, enjoy every moment.
Hold it close.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, are you out and about at all?
No, full Cheltenham study now.
Okay.
Got day 1 and day 2 previews that will come out on oddschecker for in the next couple of days.
Right.
I'm just hoping my phone isn't now going to erupt, because it was this time last year when Constitution Hill had his gallop at Kempton, and we finished recording, and about 5 minutes later my phone erupted. So hopefully that doesn't happen again this week.
Stay in one piece, Constitution Hill. Do you know, it's so. Last night I went to the Stud and Stable Staff Awards. It was so nice. Everyone's talking about the clashes and possible people on the table just going on about Constitution Hill taking on Lossiemouth and Brighter Days Ahead, and how exciting that's going to be. And everyone's like, it's quite nice to go to a racing do where people are actually talking about racing and not politics. So I'm really hoping that they all stand their ground. So by the way, if they all stand their ground, right, can anything beat him? Or
I'd be Constitution Hill all the way.
You're less confident?
Yeah, I'd still chance one of the mares, I think.
Okay, all right. Well, that'll be something to talk about at our preview, which will be on Monday the 3rd at the Drayton Court Hotel in Ealing. Hopefully you can join us for that. But that is it for this week's episode of Racing Weekly, brought to you by oddschecker in association with Bet365. Thank you very much to Steve Ryder and Dan Overall for joining me on the show this week. Don't forget, if you've liked what you've heard or watched in this or any of our previous episodes, then leave us a kind review on Apple Podcasts. And all those people who called me a moon man and living in cloud cuckoo land last week, well, yes. But I'm doubling down on Mondo Man for all you doubters out there. And don't forget, yes, I read all of that in the comment section on YouTube. Next week, of course, just to recap, Cheltenham preview live at the Drayton Court Hotel in Ealing. Hopefully you can join us for that. If you can't, the show will be uploaded on YouTube the day after. But for now, from everyone here on the Racing Weekly team, bye-bye.